You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in Northport, Florida. I've got a very, very special guest in the house today. Miss Laura, how are you doing?
I am wonderful. How are you, John?
Good. So, we had a little technical difficulty all on my half, not on yours. So I'll have you back on the show. In the next month or so, we'll get you scheduled back out, and we'll do this again. And
Okay.
and I will have all my technical stuff worked out. They
No.
were last night. So, uh, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the listening audience who you are and what you do.
Uh, Hi, I'm Lori Stevens, and I am the executive director, owner, and runner of Powerful Education Solutions and Life Skills Prep Camp, where I've been in business since 2011. The camp has been running off and on since 2015. And I work with students one-on-one or in groups to help improve their executive functioning and provide life skills, if you will. And that's actually the name of the camp. So we are working on those areas. So take Tony Robbins and make it like a lot for kids. And that's basically what I do with kids. And then I'm also an educational advocate, which means that I help families navigate the system in the school system for any kids that have needs.
Well, and as we're going through this, we all we have coaching for realtors.
Uh-huh.
We have coaching at different levels for admin people. We have coaches for CEOs, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have some coaching out there for teachers, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to kind of stack this with what we all get marketed to and what you do for the kids.
Okay. So what we get marketed to is where we look at our challenges and we choose what the challenge is and we say we want to work on this. Well, a lot of times kids don't. Their parents do, but the kids don't. So what I market um, to families for this is I actually don't market it specifically to families. I usually go to other service providers such as psychologists or social workers who counsel students because I'm not a therapist, I'm a coach, and I simply work one-on-one with students on coaching topics. So what I ask them, I talk about where are their needs in school? Are they being successful? Are they motivated? Are they procrastinators? What are some of the things? Do they know how to study? Do they know how to write in their agenda book? And that may sound very basic, but it's organization and time management. So I talk about how do I help your student be successful in school? What areas of need do your children have? And then a lot of times when students get a diagnosis for either ASD, which is autism spectrum disorder, or ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, um, the parents are like in shock and they don't know what to do next. And so I've connected with a lot of service providers and I tell them what I do. So now the service provider can tell the parent, this is what you do. You go see Lori because then Lori's going to tell you what to do next to help your kid.
That's I want to stop for a second and talk about the autistic children that are out there in this world, because there are there were prior to COVID and the lockdown, there were resources there that kind of got shut down, and the regular everyday students uh, can adapt, but some of the parents that I've talked to, they where the students, everyday students, go to school and they had maybe a little fallback and a good bounce back now. Some of the autistic children that are out there, they have a lot harder time bouncing back as fast as the regular students. Is that where you come into play there and try to bridge that gap, so to speak?
And yes, that is what I have done, but before COVID ever even hit.
Correct.
And I would actually kind of push back just a little bit, John, on what you just said, in that everyday students are adapting because they're not. Because what happened during COVID was no one could fail, right? The teachers were not allowed to fail the students because, well, they were having technical issues, which we're familiar with, or they whatever, something was going on, they weren't getting the instruction, so no one could fail. And then the following year we went to the hybrid model, and so there was a lot of contact tracing, and then so we were in the same policy, no one can fail. Well, then the teachers got tired of it. The policymakers said we're going back to normal. But for kids, they're going, wait, that's not normal for us anymore. We don't know what normal is. So they're not really bouncing back and adapting the way that they used to. So it's bad enough for the kids that have disabilities, such as the ASD and the ADHD, but even our typical students are struggling with some of this. And they're telling us we're struggling and we're not adapting to their needs. And I'm worried about that for them. And that's part of what I'm adding into my practice, and I add into my life skills prep camp.
And I've got, just in case the listening audience out there on the radio wants to check some of this stuff out, it's Real Talk 97.5 on Facebook. If you type that in, it will come up, and her information is readily available. I want you to go ahead and really highlight your website real quick, just for the listening audience that's out there.
Okay, you can get to all three, my two websites, three ways. You can get to Life Skills Prep Camp by going to lifeskillsprepcamp.com, or you can go to LoriStevensLLC.com, and that's LORISTEPHENS LLC.com, or PowerfulEducationSolutions.com. And on there, you will find a link to the camp as well.
And you also do a podcast. I see it here on that same resource page of yours.
Actually, I participated. I don't do those, but I participated in others, and then I post those on my website to share.
Fantastic. So there's a lot of information readily available then, isn't there?
Yes. I'm going to be starting another thing on my website where I will be doing something like a podcast, where I will be putting out a Monday Minute to follow up with a Wednesday Wisdom, where we expand on the topic on Wednesday.
Well, I want to stick with the students here for a little bit, because you've got a wide range of students that you can really help move forward. And in this day and age, we've got students that may be struggling a little bit, they may be struggling a lot. And the difference between a struggling student who passes, just like you said, well, we passed them because they couldn't fail. Well, I think we still pass people because we don't want them to fail anyway. And I think there's times I'll throw myself under the bus. I got held back, and it was probably a good thing I did. Because if I would have been in that group that went ahead and just passed me on, I probably would have fallen further behind.
And your self-esteem would have taken a big hit that way too.
Sure. And I did it when I was younger, like in second grade. So there was no lasting effect, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that 10th or 11th grade, that would not be different.
I would imagine that it would be different at that age. But I truly believe that a lot of that can be mitigated by how it is handled by the parent when they're talking to the student about the options. So parents can handle it perfectly, and the student could still take a self-esteem hit. Okay, that could happen. I'm not going to deny that. But sure, if a parent approaches it in the way of, look, buddy, it was a really hard year for you. You really we need to get some skills onboarded for you, and we really don't want to push you forward. This is a good choice. If we don't make it a problem, then it's not as much of a problem, and students can roll with it easier. But if we introduce it as, oh, I'm so sorry, I know you're going to be embarrassed, it's a bad thing, that's the perspective the student will take.
Where do you find that the relationship with yourself and the parent, when you first, and let's just take the fear factor out of the phone call to schedule a get together with you, what would you think is the hardest topic for the parent to talk about with you? What is their biggest fear?
Well, their biggest fear is that their child won't be successful. And,
right,
and they won't, and they say they want them to be happy, and I know they do, But really, I think the biggest fear, John, is that they won't be successful, that they won't figure it out enough to take care of themselves. And to parents, I think that that is the foundation for being happy. Well, I can take care of myself, so I'll be happy. Unfortunately, what parents don't realize is that parents are taking care of students and they're doing more and more and more for them, and students are doing less and less and less for themselves. So, how will they be happy if we're going to keep doing it for them?
And you know, the conversation from a parent to their child, I think, is probably different than you to the kid to the parent at the same time, isn't it?
Yes, and funny that you say that because it's very interesting. I when I interview with parents, I will tell them. So, especially if they have really tried a lot of different strategies and they've done different things to work on this with their student, I will say, okay, you can't get mad at your student when they get really excited about something that I say that you've said a million times, because that happens all the time. And it's that kids just don't hear their parent. No, 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 no. They talk all the time. I don't believe them. They're not an expert. Then all of a sudden, I'm the expert, and Lori said it. Coach Lori said it, so it must be true. And um, yeah, it's a very different conversation. I'm saying the same thing, but perhaps in a different way.
Well,
Uh,
you know, we've got my boys are already through high school and college at this point. My son John is at Kent State and he's finishing his master's up, and it's to think back of what we went through, and I think you're absolutely 100% correct, because I don't know that they needed coaching as much as they needed told that from somebody else. You know, your scholarship here in Florida is a value. Take it serious with your grades, because your grades are a factor in that whole thing. And some students, whether it's, I think, the ease of the curriculum for them, their problems, believe it or not, their problems are still the same, because when they have it easy on the schooling side and they can just open a book and the information jumps out, it's different than me, who had to study, and I got that C and I was overjoyed with myself. So, you know, and then, and I'm going to go back for a second and come back to you, but to watch those students, they're all in the same building and they're all getting taught the same way, and there's no deviation. And is that where the coaching comes in and gives you and the parent and the student a good range of how to approach different levels of education?
I think so. I think the answer to that would absolutely be yes. Good teaching practices. There is differences in the way the teachers approach things, and I know there are good teachers out there that they they have the same curriculum, but they do understand their students' needs and they will deliver it in a way that the student can get it. What they don't have time to teach them is how to think through multi-step projects, or how to chunk a project down, or how to begin with the end in mind, because they have a curriculum that's academically based to teach. And where I come in is I start supporting some of the skills required to execute the academics. So those kids that are struggling with memory, I have some memory strategies that I work on with them. And most students want to say, well, I don't need to write it down because I'm just going to remember it. And so I'll give them a list of 10 things. And when they can't tell me back three of them, I'm like, so you're going to remember your homework? I don't think so. We're going to write that down. Um,
Right.
so I work on memory strategies with them. We work on not multitasking, because I prefer not to multitask, but I do provide layers within a task so that they have to filter out the extra noise or the extra something, so that now we're going. So then when I take the noise away, it's so much easier to do the focused task. Um, I hope I answered
And
that.
no, you did, and you know, I'm gonna layer it anyway, because you know, when I took my boards for real estate, my struggle was there's a massive amount of information, and I actually got online, and I had from Long Beach State College out in California. Uh, I took their YouTube course on how to take a test. Now, I did that in my, I hate to say it, in my early, late 40s, early 50s. I did that.
Hmm.
Um, Talk about a mind blowing, uh, a mind blowing video course that changed my whole perception of how to take a test. The information was there, but I had to learn how to process it into what they were asking. And
Yes.
and and it was interesting on my behalf to, and it was, how do I want to say this? Life changing,
Hmm.
inspiring, confidence building, and it's all those things that you're talking about here within your course that you're trying to build upon with each and every student individually. And it's more of this, I'm going to help each one, but it's not going to be the same. We're going to build an approach for their success. Is that true?
That is true. I use a foundation of activities that I know give me the best insight to how the student is working with the task. So, how their brain is working through and processing and organizing and all of those things. So, once we get through the activities, it gives me a talking point and then things that I can add in as strategies to help with that. One of the things we do is we look at grades when they first come in. We look at the parent portal or whatever resources available for grades. And when we're looking at that, the question is, okay, so tell me what's going on with classes. And we ask a lot of questions and we process that and we record, you know, what they think happened and we see tests. They could be doing great in everything, but they tank on the test or in their testing section, that's their lowest area. So we start talking about test taking strategies. We talk about active studying versus passive studying. And so many students don't know how to study. They do what's called passive studying, which is, well, I read my notes. Well, I looked over the material. Well, that's great. But you just put your eyes on words. That didn't do anything for anchoring it into your memory, giving you access to pulling it back out later, and all of those things. And then I have other students who say, well, I studied for hours and then when I got to the test, I couldn't remember anything. So then I work on how do we get through the testing anxiety so that we can access the information and do well on the test.
Uh, and I can tell you, I haven't taken your course, but I know the tactics are validated through me, because I don't know as a student what I would have done with that type of coaching. Okay,
Mhm.
we're talking different language back in the day and
Yes.
different standards back in the day, and I kind of like the approach of coach, because if you put the word tutor in place of coach, there's a negative that gets broadcasted throughout that child's life. And it's not a bad thing. It's just kids are mean. They really
Thank
are.
you. Yeah.
And when they find out little tidbits that get under your skin, they like to write it. And
Poke, 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 poke,
that's
poke.
sort of poking the bear at this kid. They don't poke me no more because I'm big enough to take care of myself. Back in the day, I was 150 pounds soaking wet, but not anymore. But there's something to be said about having that conversation with a kid and saying, "Yeah, my coach said so." I heard you say that in what you were talking about earlier, and I've got to believe that that changes mindset too across the board, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It's actually funny you bring that part up because years ago when I started my business, I 100% knew I needed to get a reason to get out of my house Monday morning, every Monday morning. So I created a mastermind group and we met every Monday morning for 5 years. And um, we had a coach that led our group, and I still hear her voice in my head. And so when I'm talking to my students and I tell them stuff and I give them advice or we talk through things or we explore items, I said, buddy, you're going to be hearing my voice in your head for years to come. And fast forward, I have students come back and visit and they're like, I still hear your voice in my head. And I'm like, yes, I did my job. So I really appreciate being able to speak into their world.
And I better do something before I get myself in trouble. Mr. Keg, Mr. Bauer, all you guys that taught me, Mrs. Woods, all of them. I better like give some shout outs here because I'm not knocking the great experience I had in my classroom with still teachers to this day that I communicate with and have written papers in college about, which is amazing. So I know exactly what you're talking about because influence comes at a whole bunch of different levels, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And so when you were talking about the tutor thing, when people call me a tutor now, I'm like, because
Yeah.
you're right, it does have that kind of negative connotation, but it also, it very specifically says, okay, here's material. I need help with this, work with this material. And yes, a student can certainly bring material in and I'll certainly help them with that material, but I'm not tutoring them. I am showing them how to figure it out for themselves. And that is a big difference between tutoring, coaching, and even being a learning specialist.
So let's go back to the fear factor of why they should call you. And I'll tell you, if we have students or parents that are listening right now, I think the biggest thing that you should be afraid of is not picking up the phone and not calling, and not at least sitting through a presentation to see if there's a good fit. Fear is going to be worse when you get older if you don't address it now. So if you've got a scenario that's playing out with your kid at home or kids at home, and you're finding yourself with a difficult decision, why not get a free consult? And if they were looking to get a free consult, what number would they call?
Well, first, I would advise them to go to one of the websites that I said earlier because I have online scheduling available. There's a complimentary 30-minute consultation available on the Book It Now section of my website, or they would call 941-312-4777, and we would get back to you just as quickly as possible to get that scheduled.
And there are kids like me. I keep using myself for an example. I was that uh, I back in the day. I'll throw a little back in the day in there, but we had SWATs back in the day in school. So that was my incentive to not get an F, was I didn't want that SWAT from my track coach. And so that was incentive. And then I had really good teachers who pulled me aside and said, listen, you have got to focus here, here, and here. But in today's world where we have an extra 10 to 12 students per classroom, a lot of times we have overload of information a lot of times, and then layer that with the social side of school, along with you're coming home and you're part of a team effort. This building block that you've got going on to have a level-minded student doing all of these tasks, I I got to believe that even the advanced students have management issues and can learn how to manage and structure themselves a little different. Is that something that you would work on too?
Yeah, oh yes, yes. I have every year I have a minimum of 3 students that attend Pineview School, which is our area school for gifted students with IQs over 130. And they come in, and here's what's really interesting. They're brilliant, obviously. They have high IQs. It's very cool. They look at something and boom, they just get it. And if they don't, the self esteem takes a major hit. Why don't I get this? Everything else is so easy. I must be stupid. I've got to be the stupidest person on the face of this earth because this thing that you just gave me was too hard. Like, wow, where did that come from? And they have such pressure on themselves because everything else is just so easy.
You weren't sitting at my desk this morning, were you?
No, 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 what I miss.
Well, everything just you just said, I said to myself this morning, because here's the thing in life, we deal with this stuff, and the coaches that are out there, they're the ones that talk you down. We've got good coaches at Remax, and my time at the radio station is a lot of time is with RJ on the phone, and it's not sometimes it's the stressors of, and I told you this earlier, since 7:30 this morning, there really hasn't been one thing go correct. When you start stacking all of those things on top of each other, that can be a kid at school, and at any level. And once you start stacking that, the negative vibe is the here's my positive. I got to talk to my coach online today, uh, doing my radio show. So you pulled me out of that negative. That's sort of what you do with a structured outline too, with a student, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I try to do. I try to turn everything into a positive. What are we going to do? How are we going to move this forward? Okay, so this is where we are. And that's the difference between coaching and therapy as well, from my understanding on this level, is that I don't go back and look at, well, all the things that happen. I'm like, okay, here's where we are. We're going to move forward. What's the plan to move forward? So we set the structure, we put things in place to help them move forward and figure out what steps are. Sometimes I do have to look back and say, okay, well, let's see, 3 times we know this has happened. And from what I understand from those 3 experiences, the key is right here. And we tweak that piece of it. And I'm trying to think of a good example, but not really coming up with one at the moment.
That's okay. As we keep talking, I bet something pops into the idea factory there. But when you're dealing with different styles of students, and I think we need to talk about that too a little bit, because when you're dealing with uh, a student that's out there that is having difficulty in math, but has everything else intact. And then you're dealing with a student over here that's English and math, and it's more of a, and I'm going to say this, even though my teachers know how much I appreciate them, their teaching style within the school structure a lot of times, and even today, we have whiteboards, we have things we didn't have when I was a kid that they're using now. And I've got to believe that if I had difficulty, if you put it on the back of a baseball card, I had it. I had it, and I've got it the rest of my life because it's still there. People say in 1973, who hit that? I'm like, I got that still today. I've got
Mhm.
it memorized. And I always thought, man, they should put things on the back of baseball cards just so I'd learn them. And that was my style of learning, though. That truly is where the difference is with a coach now slash old school tutor back then, is that you're really dissecting things and trying to figure out how to get that student into the learning zone, aren't you?
Yes, yes. My longest standing student just graduated this year, and I am so proud of him. I started working with him, and this is never my intent, but I started working with him when he finished 3rd grade, moving up to 4th grade, and he just graduated. Now, typically, I am the person that I want you in, out, done. I don't want you to be a repeating year after year client, because if you've onboarded the skills I'm offering you, you should not need me. But he did, and we just got him graduated, and working through that, it's been a chore. And oh my goodness, I just lost my train of thought.
Your
No,
student, your
yes,
long
my
last,
long-standing student. But what were you talking about? Help me connect it. I'm so sorry.
the back of the baseball cards and
Yes,
adapting.
learning styles. Thank you. Yes. Oh my gosh, he's a language processor. It was an issue. Did I mention I have ADD as well? Okay.
That's all right. I think we're all there today.
His learning style needed to be active. And so whenever we had a test to study for or something really to learn, we would talk about it, we would review it, we would go over it. And then we would go out with the basketball. And I would say, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to ask you a question. If you answer it correctly, you may shoot a basket. If you get it incorrect, you owe me 5 push-ups. If you shoot the ball when you didn't answer a question correctly, you owe me 10 push ups. Because he knew we were going out to use the ball, he was focused, he was in, and he listened and he gave it back to me and he had it. We went out, we got the ball. Every time he was on it, getting those answers correct, and he passed those tests the next day because I figured out he needs movement, he likes basketball, here's how we do that. So if you were my student, all I would have figured out how to get stuff on a baseball card for you because that's your gig. I would have made sure that happened.
And that's really a to me that's exciting. Most people wouldn't think that, but the idea of a flashcard didn't work the same way. Believe it or not, it was not part of that mindset for me. I was so locked in to my neighbor behind my house, and I couldn't wait to get home and strategize over what I had in front of me. I can still to this day strategize in my mind based on the baseball cards back in the day. And it's to be able to move and do those things quickly. It's the same thing as a radio show and how you adapt to the moment and interchange some information out and then move forward. It's and I wondered why radio and this podcast stuff came like exciting to me. And I think it's really being able to talk through some of the experiences I've had. And, my mom's out there listening, I'm sure. And I've got Chuck English, who threw up, there's mentors. Well, you can have a coach as a mentor. You can have a teacher as a mentor. You can have Chuck English as a mentor and have coffee with him and learn nothing. I'm teasing Chuck. But the funny thing is, I think with the way you're doing the coaching style, it opens the floodgates to communication.
And that is what I really focus on is communication because I'm a Toastmaster as well, which is a public speaking leadership club. It's an international club and it's about public speaking. And I'm huge on communication. I'm forever saying words matter. And I teach kids, listen, think about this. You have to, and then whatever it is they love to do. So for instance, if you love swimming, you have to swim all day, every day for 30 days. You have to do it. All of a sudden that sounds yucky because I have to. But if I go, listen, you get to swim all day, every day for 30 days, you get to. All of a sudden it's like, yeah, here we go, let's do it. Words matter. So you have to think about that. And communication is huge. I open communication with the student and I start out the very first session with them and we talk about yes, no, negotiate. If I ask you to do something and you tell me yes, you better get it done because you have the right to say no or negotiate.
Here's the thing. I've got about 1 minute to get off of the radio. I'm going to leave you on Facebook here for a minute, but this is John Rawlings with WKDW Radio 97.5. Join us next Monday for some real exciting things. I'm not going to tell you what it is, so you got to chime in and join the show and even the communications. Like my friend Chuck English put some comments down. So please join us on Monday, 3:05. We go live and we're off the air at 4. So thank you so much for listening in. So we're still live on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. And one of the things I want to kind of set up for the next time, because that was 100% my fault that we were delayed getting on the air, and then technical issue galore today. But I think we should talk about what students you can bring in to this conversation. I don't think you have better advocates than that out there right now, and maybe even a parent or two to describe to them how it's not just changed life. Because I'm gonna throw this at you because I didn't study what you did, but it seems to me that if you take and you become the coach of the educational piece in working with the parent and the student, there has got to be a relief for a parent.
And that is a lot of times my selling point at the very end of a conversation. What I offer is the ability to salvage your relationship with your child. Take that piece out of it so you don't have to look at the grades and stress about what they're not doing or their low grades or da 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 da. That's me. That's my job. I get to be the bad guy. I get to be the heavy. I get to be the one to put it in front of the student. And that way you get to do the good things. So that is the one thing. And, I want to go back to the fear factor for parents that you were talking about a little earlier. The fear factor is they're afraid they've done it wrong and it's their fault. And that is one of the first things I try to dispel with them is that it's not your fault. That here are some even if there were things you could have done differently, it is not your fault. But here's where we are and here's where we're going and here are the things that you can do. And every week I give them some things they can do. And
Right.
before we stop, John, I really want to talk about my life skills prep camp that's going
Please,
on.
please.
Yes, I've got life skills prep camp. We've got next week is the last week of session 1. Then I've got session 2, which is June, right after that, June 14th through 30th, I think. And then I've got one in July from the 10th to the 21st. And it's everything I do in my office in a group. But we do more fun things like line dancing and cooking, and we do a lot of communication. Today we did kablooey, where you blindfold one of the students and the other student has to get them from one end of the room to the other without running into anything by communicating. Take 2 steps forward, take 1 baby step back or whatever. And I did it the first time and I was blindfolded and a student told me, just walk forward. Just walk forward. Now, if he had to say, go forward 3 steps, I would have been fine. But no, he said, walk forward. The anxiety was tremendous, but I was able to talk about it in the moment and say, oh my gosh, my anxiety is really bad right now. I don't know if I should trust him. What should I do? And my campers were listening and they're going, ooh, 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 but they saw me do it. And they saw that I was successful in how it worked. So Life
Right.
Skills Prep Camp takes everything we do in office and puts it in a camp situation where we're having fun learning.
Where would you put that in the importance on the scale of a student who comes to you and has to learn that that side of things in your camp? What do you see from the minute they walk into the camp to where they leave?
I see students that are very shy and insecure and not aware of how to handle themselves to when they leave, they have friends. Their executive functioning is stronger and they have more confidence in who they are and how they function because as we go through our day all day long, we're talking about what happened, so what, now what? We're talking about what are we doing next? What's the organization? What is your goal? We're talking to them all day long and we're getting feedback from them all day long. And so beginning to end, we see a shift in mostly self-confidence and then they've got their friends and they have onboarded some skills that they're real excited about as well.
That's awesome. I definitely want to have you back on the show. I and we will definitely talk about how to get that arranged. And I don't care how long out it is. I did not do you justice today because this was a lot of fun for me
Thanks.
to learn about what you do and how you handle it. And I'm encouraged, and I'm going to share this with a lot of the teachers over at the schools and try to get them to share it more because anything that we can do to help the students and help the teachers really keep everything organized. If you want your kid to go to an advanced classes, there's no better reason not to have a coach there to help that transition. And there's so much funding that's out there for your child in Florida to get good grades. So keep that focus in mind. It sometimes paying for things now gets you that scholarship later, and those are bigger numbers than what we're talking. So keep
Yes.
that in mind. And if there's anything you want to add there, Lori, go ahead.
Um, just think about what you're paying now. You're going to triple that later because if you don't deal with some of the issues now, they're going to be compounded and a lot worse and a lot harder to shift later.
Well, and I've got one comment that my mom put up there because she is watching. Um, she said that her teacher or my teachers back in the day, and we're talking a long time ago. My mom's so much younger than I am, so I'm not going to go there. But back in the day, my teachers told her to get books that I was interested, and she can still remember reading the sports books. Well, Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, those are books I still remember. Back when she transitioned from the BS that she was reading me prior to that, Mom, because I was listening, but I wasn't retaining the information that I got out of the sports books and things I really like to do. Man, if you could make this more fun for your kids and get a coach involved that is creative, take that stress off of you at home. It to me that's gotta be just worth a ton of stress and money, and think of your relationship building that you would have with the child at the same time, because you're not so frustrated. You've got a third party kind of getting creative and getting information in. So I'm trying to add these things in for you because they're so personal to me that I can actually see the advantages of having that.
Well, anytime you run into anybody that needs it, I'm here, and I'm always willing to share anything I know, and I'm very flexible. So I my goal is to help. Do I need to earn money and get paid so I can pay my bills? 100%. But my real deal is if I have information that it's going to help someone, I'm going to share it.
Well, and it's interesting to watch. I think it would be interesting to watch the kid transition. If you're in that spot right now, you've got to find a solution. And throwing your hands in the air and blaming the school system, that's an easy way. It's a cop out too. Every child, and I'm a living example of you've got to adapt to me because you've got to get inside my brain here and kind of work things out. And I think we lump everybody together, we judge everybody together, and then expectations are, why didn't you do what everybody else did? Because I'm not everybody else, and neither is your child if they need a little help. And there's nothing better than asking for help early, and really solving those problems, and maybe getting some different study habits, some different test taking habits that actually spew confidence instead of, here's just one thing I'll say: the test taking, the little detail that I missed all my life until I took that course, and it was a free course, by the way. It just going through and answering the questions, all the questions that I knew, and it was very simple. It was go through and answer the questions that you know, and let your computer mind get rid of that information and move the next file forward. I remember him saying that, and I do that today. I take my tests and I get all the ones I gotta get out of my head, and I go back through and then I answer the ones I know again, and I move that file forward, and I just keep layering that idea in my head, and I don't change answers. And it's the biggest mistake I think students make because they lack the confidence, because it's built in that, oh my God, I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. I can't get these first five. The rest of the test is going to be horrible. And
Yep.
when you go through the test and the first five you are bad at, and you get the next 10 and you skip five and you get six, and by the time you're done, you've got half of the test done, and the same amount of time as the brilliant student across two desks over. And what was amazing to me is when I got good at it, and what you teach, I'm sure is the same way. The students aren't lacking that anymore, and they're not the last ones throwing their hands in the air, going, "I only got 20 questions. I'm so frustrated. I'm done." I think that's the gist of this whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Yeah, giving them the strategies to have the confidence to get through it. And I've given that strategy to students. Do the ones you know, go back, look through it, then answer more questions, because sometimes as you go, more information is provided through the question that you can go back up and you know so and then isolate. If it's a multiple choice, you get rid of the two off answers. that kind of thing. So yes, where we run into issues with students with ADHD is they forget to go back and look at and check for the ones they skipped. So a strategy I came up with for a student is they have to have a scratch paper right next to them. And if they skip the number, they write the number on the piece of paper. So when they get all the way to the end, they go back to those numbers and make sure they check them off so they know that they've done them.
Well, I hope they may have this in schools today, but I hope they come up with what we use in real estate when we have a contract signed, is that we go through our contract, we have everything identified, we get everything signed, and if you miss something, it makes you go back and look at what you missed. I'm sure that there's probably some electronic tests out there like that today, but I don't know if it's filtered all the way down into the school system, all the way down through. But that it's coming. That's coming, and I can tell by you're shaking your head that that's coming along with other things. But those
I'm
are all
sure.
things that are going to help students.
John,
And
they help and they don't help because now I don't have to do anything to remember to go back because the computer's going to do it for me.
yeah,
That's where I get a little worried because now I don't have to. Something else is going to do it for me. So we keep coming up with those kinds of ideas and things in place for students, and they don't do it anymore.
and we do that. We do it a lot. I mean, we've got some real issues out there right now with some AI. Uh, they're using that for writing papers and in college and high school and middle school, and you
Middle
know
school, I had a middle schooler do it.
I know it's crazy. It's crazy, and the software that is amazing. It's the platforms that aren't there to catch that now. They are behind, but they're coming. But by the time that's done, AI is going to be so much further advanced. It's almost scary, some of the things I've seen on the videos for what is, everybody says futuristic. Sorry, when you're building it and you can watch it and you
It's
can see
here.
it, it's not futuristic, it's now.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
it's crazy, but that anything that we can do to help students, including the coaching side of it, I'm all behind. I think the next time you're on, I hope we can put together some students and some parents, and even a school that you've worked directly with, even a teacher you've worked directly with. I think having that influence across the board and having that total story is really worth telling.
I'd be happy to try to get some people to sit down and we'll do this together. Absolutely.
You put it together, and I'll get you the dates.
All right.
You know that I'll make it happen.
That would be
So
awesome.
I appreciate your time today. I appreciate everybody listening in, and please share the video, get it out there as much as possible. I'm going to get it over to the teachers and beg them to share it. You know how that gets, but
Yeah.
please feel free to contact Lori and uh, advance your student into what they need to be advanced into, which is building confidence, clearing out their head from all the garbage that they've put in there themselves a lot of times, and help them turn a corner. Because if you can help them turn that corner, uh, it's going to pay dividends.
It will. It will. So, John, get me that link and I will share it everywhere.
All right,
All
you got
right.
it. I'll
Thank
send
you.
it.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye
Thanks.
now.
Bye.